Would you like to know why companies are kicking cloud to the curb and yet there's still more opportunities for cloud architects? If so, this video is for you. Hi, my name is Michael Gibbs, and I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I'm here with David Linthicum, who's an expert on cloud and generative AI. David had made a video about 2 or 3 weeks ago about why companies are kicking cloud to the curb. I've recently been writing some articles for some big tech publications on cloud repatriation, which is essentially the same thing. So we're really happy to talk about why companies are going off of the cloud and why some companies will still be going on the cloud. So what's really going on here? So I'll begin with you, David. David, what do you see? Why are people leaving the public cloud and going back to the data center?
That's a great question. I mean, the short answer would be it was too expensive for them for what they did, because they moved applications, workloads, data sets to the cloud, but weren't willing to make the investment in modernizing and refactoring those systems in the cloud to make them efficient and more useful. So, kind of go back, 3 years to the pandemic, or even 10 years when cloud started, people were pushing them to move as many applications and workloads to the cloud. It's the next generation stuff. Get out of that data center. We're going to sell the equipment. All that kind of stuff was just kind of the meme of the day. And I think a lot of companies bit. And so they moved hundreds and sometimes thousands of applications to the cloud. And then suddenly, and we saw this more in 2022, they got this huge cloud bill that came in. And so they go, what happened here? And as I write in my book, it was like 2.5 times what they thought they were going to be spending. And when they looked and analyzed at it, they realized that their unwillingness to spend the money in modernizing those applications to leverage the cloud native systems made those applications incredibly inefficient, and then cost was way up in running them on the cloud. And they had the same sort of maintenance problems and things like that. So they looked at it and they say, we can spend $1 million or so to modernize the stuff in place, which we don't have. So guess what? It's going back on premise, back to the hardware that we didn't sell. By the way, the hardware that's 10 times cheaper than it was 10 years ago. Data center still around. Mainframes are still in the data center. And so in many instances, they did what's called a cloud exeter. And lots of people wrote and spoke about this, where they pulled things back and moved things back on premise. And they found that it's going to be cheaper, more reliable, all those sorts of things. This David Hansen has an article out there. It's the Great Cloud Exit FAQ. I think that was close, where he talks about what he found out. And he has a small company that makes a development tool that ran everything on AWS, and then figured out that he was spending $3 million a year on the same infrastructure. He went out and bought $400,000 of equivalent hardware, put it in a data center, probably had that he rented, and he found his bill was cut in half, if not more. I should read the FAQ to get the exact figures. People are seeing that, and they're saying, okay, I'm asking the question, if cloud is going to be expensive, although convenient, and I understand that's where the development's occurring, I'm going to have all the options on the table, including putting things back in the data center. And by the way, I think that's good for cloud, Mike, because in essence, we're finally able to get the value from cloud computing. Those applications and data sets never should have been there in the first place. And I was warning against that years ago. And it's good that they're correcting the action. And also enterprises are becoming more savvy in terms of triage what applications and data sets actually belong in the cloud. Therefore, more people are going to be successful. They're going to find more value in the cloud. And I think the cloud providers are going to sell more cloud as a result of that. But we're putting everything back on the table, and cloud's no longer going to be the consolidation or the destination everybody's moving into. It's going to be the best platform wins. Sometimes that's on premise, sometimes that's in the cloud, sometimes that's my wristwatch, sometimes that's my phone, edge computing. It's all on the table, and we leverage whatever platforms we need to leverage to get to a point where the maximum amount of value is being returned to the business. And that's the duty of an architect, in my opinion.
I'm completely agree with you. We looked at our organization, Go Cloud Careers, and said, should we host it on the public cloud or should we host it in our data center? Well, we actually decided to buy refurbished servers directly from Amazon. And they were using these dual E5 2670 V3s, which are basically the same servers that AWS uses in their i3 instances. Now, we bought the 10 servers from AWS for $10,000. AWS wanted $11,000 a month to host the same servers that we bought for them one time for $10,000. So when we factored it out over the course of 3 years, 4 years, it'd be about $400,000 on AWS and about $10,000 for us to run our own OpenStack cloud, which we choose to do. And, for me, and I love the public cloud, I really do, and I move many workloads to the public cloud as long as it helps my client's business. The cloud is just somebody else's data center for the most part. It's the same servers, the same routers, the same switches, the same storage area networks. And, the cloud provider has to charge more than their cost because that's how they operate. It's a landlord-tenant model. So it has to be cheaper. And unfortunately, I think people got stuck on the AWS Cloud Practitioner and all these intro certifications that simplified things. They said moving to the cloud will be cheaper because of an economy of scale, which in theory is true. Sure, a cloud provider can buy things at 40% or 50% discount because they're big. What they didn't talk about is what happens when you're hyperscale. And when you're hyperscale and at that size, the maintenance and all the single points of failure that need to be addressed and the scale to manage this could go up extremely big. It's kind of the difference between private enterprise and a government. There's a reason private enterprise can generally do things more efficiently because they're less big. They have less scale. So I totally agree with you on that. I personally think the data center offers typically better performance as well because there's no wide area network, so we've reduced the latency. But I think it's a great opportunity for cloud architects anyway, because now, it gives us the opportunity to take the stuff off the cloud and put them the public cloud and move it to a private cloud, meaning more job opportunities. And it gives we architects a chance to really reanalyze the business and architect it correctly, to look at these workloads and say, well, this goes back to the data center. This one goes to the cloud. This one's better off on this cloud. This thing is better in the cloud, so let's write it, rewrite it, re-architect the application to run properly, and then get the best out of everything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the architects really should have an open mind in terms of all of the viable platforms that are in front of them. In fact, one of the things I do when I hired architects is I would ask them the question. In other words, how would you make a selection in a particular workload as to where it should go? And if they only answered the cloud, sometimes they only answered with one cloud brand. That wasn't somebody who's a good viable architect because they're not opening their mind and looking at all the possibilities as to where these were moving to. So they talk about understanding the requirements and looking at the performance and looking at the data IO rate and looking at the growth of the database, scalability, as you just mentioned, horizontally and vertically. And you have a good profile of what the thing is, then you figure out the best platform to make that happen. And by the way, if you make the wrong call, then you're going to waste many millions of dollars that are going to be removed from the business just to pay for your cloud bill because you made a mistake in moving someplace where it shouldn't move. And by the way, it works. That's what people always say, well, it works there. I understand it works, but it works for 10 times the cost. And if you start playing that game and you're doing that 10, 15, 20 times, sometimes 100 times over, you're going to end up putting your business in jeopardy because they're going to pay too much for their IT spending, and you're not going to get the value that's coming back from it. So architects out there, heed this warning in terms of opening up your mind, never be closed off, remove your biases, because that's the only way you're going to win the war for your client, for your employer, whomever is paying you to build these systems.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And, to me, it's like, which is the best cloud? There's no such thing as a best cloud. There's no such thing as the best tech. What's best for the client? Initially, when I was young and had a lot to learn, I remember thinking about 25 years ago, the mainframe was going to go away because it had non-routable traffic and it was a nightmare over a network. And I thought, this stuff's going to go away. And then I realized as I learned more, and my next job was at a bank, and I started to see the volume of transactions these mainframes could process. And I started to see, wow, these are really good for what they're doing. And it dawned on me then 23 years ago, these mainframes aren't going anywhere. And then again, I see the cloud providers out there. The mainframes are costing you too much. Get rid of your mainframes. But based on what? Why is it costing too much? Who said it's costing too much? Banks and other big businesses are now spending more money on mainframes.
Yeah, and there's viable reasons to move off mainframes, and there's viable reasons to move to mainframes. And they're a platform that should be considered in every architectural decision. To your point, there's things that mainframes can do, batch processing, huge amounts of data crunching in a very short amount of time that other systems can't do. And by the way, There are no analogs on the clouds right now for these mainframe-based systems. But if you want to engage with this managed service provider or a colo provider, you can rent these systems from me. And I think that's perfectly fine. So it should be a contender for running even net new applications on. And certainly we should ask lots of questions if people are trying to sell us on taking something off the mainframe, running it under an emulator on the cloud, and giving up the performance and giving up some of the capabilities of that system, and probably end up costing many more times that of the existing mainframe systems. I mean, those costs are typically sunk. You're already paying for the license fees of the systems. I get it, they're expensive, but it's probably more expensive to get rid of them and then try to fake your way on some other system. So you just consider everything. People say we should never move applications off mainframes. No, absolutely. We should do if it makes sense to do it. But there's also reasons to put applications on mainframes, and understanding that these things are going to be citizens within your architecture and they need to earn their value place, and we need to understand what they are and the role they're going to play. So nothing should be eliminated from the options that we need to pick from.
Yeah, and that's the point. If our whole job as architects is optimize our client's business, why wouldn't we want to leverage every tool that we have at our disposal? Old tools, new tools, tools are tools.
Well, tools are tools, and we leverage the best of breed tool for the job. That should always be the case. I don't care where it runs. I just want to know what it does, the value it's going to be able to bring, and make the core decisions. And by the way, if I make a bad decision, that's part of the journey. I just admit this is a bad decision. This is not going to make us money. We're going to hit the reset button on this particular thing, and I think everybody should high five when you're doing that, because you're interrupting a problem before it costs you many millions of dollars. I used to surprise people who work for me when they come in and say, listen, look, we made a mistake in we're moving this particular database. And even though we're 6 months down the line, we're going to need to pull the plug on this. And I would shake their hand. I said, that's absolutely the right decision. I know it was hard to have those conversations, certainly going into the board of directors and tell them, remember the 1,000 applications we put on the cloud? Hey, yes, we're putting them back. But if you're not having those conversations, then you're just going to continue the damage. You're just going to continue the bloodletting. And that's something you can't do as an architect. You're always going to be reevaluating what you're doing. You're always going to be making changes. You're always going to be looking for better value opportunities to change the technology. Sometimes that's going to be erasing decisions you made a few years ago. That's okay. That's your job.
Yeah, and that's it's the constant reevaluation. I come from healthcare long before I started architecture. Someone comes in, you evaluate their problem, and you make a diagnosis, you come up with a plan. You bring them back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, that plan's not working. Okay, you change the plan. And architecture to me is the same thing. Today, the business vision is this. 3 months later, you might be, as you're planning the architecture, there could be something that's changing in the world, and we need to start from scratch. And I'm okay with that. And yes, I've been in the same place. I've been on leading large projects, and midway through, we realized there was a mistake. And I'd rather catch that mistake and re-architect it right then and there and fix it than go down the path of adding more technical debt, creating more problems, getting deeper and deeper into the mistake just to say, project's completed, and now create a new set of problems.
Do you think there's just a certain amount of courage that needs to be come along for the ride? In other words, we have to have the ability to make unpopular decisions and have the courage to talk to people in ways that we normally don't want to talk to them. I understand I don't want to admit a problem, things like that, but someone who works for me that has the fortitude and the courage to make the right decisions, that's a leader. That's someone you want on your side. They're going to make some mistakes. That's perfectly fine. That's one thing, but their ability to admit the issue and figure out how to reset it is going to really kind of go to their value. And so part of being a good architect out there is always reevaluating your decisions and being your own devil's advocate. In other words, and being a devil's advocate to people you work with and having them be a devil's advocate to you. I always tell people on the architecture teams that I'm on, you have an obligation to descend. In other words, as I put forth these solutions, you need to tell me when there's a concern or there's something we should look at. You need to evaluate and double check what we're doing to make sure we're making the right decisions. If you don't tell me, I'm not going to know. And that's how we work as a team. I don't care if you've been here for a day or 10 years. You have the same worth in my mind as having a valid opinion, and I'm going to listen to everybody. And I think running teams like that and being a good architect really goes to being a good leader, having the courage, the ability to accept criticism, and the ability to use that criticism to do your job better, and also to learn. I mean, I learn from my mistakes more than anything else, and I make them all the time. And I also learn from people who call me out on stuff. Okay, I understand why I did that. I probably should have reevaluated that. I missed something. Guess what? I won't miss it again. But that's the only way you mature as an architect, as an executive architect, as a developer, as an engineer. People hold these different positions. And I think it's really important as we're moving forth with generative AI, and we're getting to the whole complex solution bandwagon again. Everything's only a few days old and how we're implementing it, that we have this attitude and we're making the right decisions and making the right calls. I'm feared that we're going to end up repeating many of the same mistakes we made with cloud, which caused the repatriation. Kind of brings us back to where we got here. And I would rather not do that with the generative AI stuff. We know enough not to make those mistakes. We need to start asking the questions, and we need to start building good architects with the talent out there that are going to be able to get you to a successful decision the first time.
I completely agree. A degree of confidence is there, the ability to have a difficult conversation, the ability to be confident, and the ability to be open and honest in both giving feedback and receiving feedback, and then not having what they used to call it a religious argument where you only believe in this and it's going to be this way and you can't change it. I'm in complete agreement. You know, it's funny, I was teaching my architect students the other day about how to have difficult conversations, and I said, we're going to have them. So let's plan on how to have them, plan on ways to do it where you can bring out the best in others, communicate what you need, and deepen a relationship as opposed to harming a relationship. David, I'm always so grateful for you sharing your thoughts with our audience. Thank you so much about talking about cloud repatriation. Like I said, I feel this creates more opportunities for cloud architects because now they can architect even better solutions than they could in the first place.
It's better for everybody. And I think everybody have an open mind. We're going to build better systems.
So thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to be notified of more videos just like this to help you in your cloud computing career. Take care, everyone.